It says live.
All right.
Okay, we'll go. Producer says it's not showing up on his end, but we are assuming we are live. Greetings from the Dark Ozarks, everyone. Although, I mean, we don't have a count yet, but it does say live.
Yep, I'm seeing it on my side. Hello, everybody. Yes, I am.
Good.
And hi, Lisa.
Hi, Josh. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I am doing good. I got my coffee cup, my full-size coffee cup, so I'm rocking it out.
There we go. You're prepared to talk then.
Absolutely. And it is literally the Dark Ozarks. It's starting to get dark here.
It is, and plus we had a thunderstorm move through.
Yes.
So at both ends, both here and you're in too. So
I know, and of course for people who aren't necessarily, might be watching in from other regions or other parts of the country, we're both in the Ozarks, but what,
about 2 hours.
2 hours apart.
Yeah. So
and I think that illustrates that the Ozarks are a lot. It is a geographically, the Ozarks are a very large space.
Yes, it is. It would make a fairly good sized state on its own.
Absolutely. And you're in the Joplin area, which is also the tri-state mining district. An incredibly beautiful part of the Ozarks border, as the rockiness of the Ozarks transitions into what was originally that tall grass prairie of Kansas and out toward Oklahoma, and lots of really cool, spooky things seem to be associated with that portion of the Ozarks. And then I'm down in the White River Valley, or White River Country, near Branson, and it's topographically it's a lot different. It's a bit rougher, and and of course there's a lot of we've got the old White River, which is now a series of dammed lakes, and then all of the streams and tributaries that are a part of that. And I'm 14 miles from the state line of Arkansas.
Well, and of course, if you want to look at it that way, I'm 5 miles from Kansas and about 15 from Oklahoma. So,
yes.
So we have everything but Illinois covered pretty much.
Absolutely. And I'm originally from Illinois, so
there you go.
It's although I am not originally from the Ozarks, but I do believe that I understand the Ozarks, and a lot of that comes from my family background.
Well, yeah, and you've lived here quite a while, anyway. So.
Yeah. I've been an embedded part of the Ozarks for a dozen years, and was associated with the Ozarks. I've been associated in one way, shape, or form with the Ozarks since I was 20 years old.
There you go. Well, that I think that qualifies.
I've definitely I've gone native, Lisa. I really have.
Well, speaking of going native in the Ozarks, our topic tonight is that the Ozarks have always embraced the outlaw and the anti-hero.
Yes.
And often that they were one and the same.
Very much so. Very much so. And I love that culture. I love that culture so much.
Well, and I think that, even if for people who are not familiar with the history in this area that speaks to that, I think we all have grown up with it because it really is what we see in so much of entertainment, in movies, books, etc., in one form or another, from the Western, the loner in a Western to, I mean, you can argue that, the same kind of characters are in Breaking Bad and Ozarks, etc. Ozarks is
I,
an example of an anti-hero.
I,
Um,
I would agree, definitely.
so
And
that fits.
it does. It really does. And I think one of the things that it speaks to, I mean, the Ozarks to a certain degree, less so today, but to a certain degree have been always isolated.
Yes.
There's a sense of isolation. and of course it's not the only place in North America that's isolated, but you look at areas that are geographically difficult to traverse, and you will find elements of that, hidden elements or elements of individuals who seek out those locations because they want to be left alone or they want to hide, one of the two.
Yeah, often sometimes running from something, want to hide, forget the past, etc. And I think often people, they really don't associate that this area did not sort of spring into settlement in the 1800s.
No.
You really have to go back. Well, you had a number of Indian tribes here for hundreds, thousands of years. I mean, even in the 1700s, there were French and Spanish observers who would say there were meetings in different places in the Ozarks of up to 100 tribes at a time.
Mm-hmm.
And then you had the Spanish starting in the 1500s coming through here, and the French, and French settlers in the 1600s who they were the first ones to actually bring slavery to the Ozarks. So you always had that sense that it was a way station. People were coming through, and it was a conduit to other places too.
It is. And something, of course, again, referencing the Dark Ozarks tagline, sometimes there are no easy answers. There is what seems like almost a contradiction. On one hand, the Ozarks were a crossroads, a thoroughfare. For people who are familiar with the Ozarks, I-44, massive transit way, used to be, old Route 66, historic Mother Road. Before that, wagon train. Before that, Buffalo Trail. There were people transitioning through the Ozarks for millennia. And yet something that is so interesting, from about 1820 until about 1920, 100 years, when America underwent, a convoluted series of industrial revolutions. That industrial revolution, kind of like the Ozarks were an island and the industrial revolution just split around it. So much so that, where I live here in Hollister, if I stay up or if I have the windows open, I can hear the trains come through, the freights come through Hollister. Hollister is a railroad town, was a railroad town, and yet that the railroad did not come through until the 20th century. That Hollister is relatively new. For people who are familiar with Branson, Branson is comparatively speaking, very new, founded in 1913. Same year my grandmother was born. And, when my grandmother was born in Southern Iowa, near Highway 34 and the Burlington Northern Rail, that railway system had been through for decades when my grandmother was born. So, we did that piece. I did that piece with Color 10 on Melva, the town that was blown away. 100 years ago, last month, the town was destroyed by a tornado. And yet, the town was built in 1906, 1907. I think it was officially platted around 1909. That was the year, my grandfather was born. Comparatively speaking, and I realize, it's obviously a while back, but comparatively speaking, not that long ago.
No, and I think part of that comes from in the experience in the Ozarks in the mid 1800s. You had developments were improvements were coming, say in Springfield and Fayetteville and different places. And then basically when the Civil War happened, it disrupted all the order.
It did.
Very chaotic. And a difference between what happened here and say in the South was we really didn't have Reconstruction. Now Reconstruction has the negative political connotations, but part of it was kind of putting the building blocks back together, putting the railroads back together, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And basically there was a vacuum here for several decades after the war, where basically they had to pick up where things were left off before the war.
Yeah.
And so in that, say 30 years, you didn't have a lot of law enforcement. You didn't have a lot of industrial development or economic development. And so what was left were people forging their own ways and trying to make it. And I think that environment is one reason that they continue to identify with the outlaw and the anti-hero.
I really do. And something that, it's something that's really reminded, and of course, shameless plug, I just have kept this book. Now that I found it, I just kept it out on my desk. Vance Randolph, by the time he published this book again, 1947, he's dealing with a culture that has not been impacted by industrialization the way the rest of the country had been at that point, or much of the rest of the country had been at that point.
Right.
And I think it's something that I've spent, as a journalist, I've spent quite a bit of time studying. It's trying to think of the right word for it. Almost, a point where art imitates life, life imitates art, forced anachronism and deliberate anachronism. By the time that, from about 1907, when Shepherd of the Hills was published, our White River Hill country became a tourist destination for a lot of North America. And people came to this county, Taney County, and Stone County, specifically looking for the characters that they had read about in Shepherd of the Hills by Harold Bell Wright. And it did not take the locals very long to figure out that if they capitalized on being hillbillies, quote unquote, that they could make a living, right, or certainly make money off of that. And I think from a cultural standpoint, it's such an interesting study because you have individuals who are hill people. They I with my background, I identify as a hillbilly. I think a lot of people probably do identify as hillbillies. And they were. And then they also adopted the anachronism in order to make money off of tourists. And it created its own culture that was holding on to, the idea that you could make money by whittling figurines or out of native wood, or you could make money out of weaving baskets, or you could make money out, these types of things with and creating these cottage industries. And where much of the rest of the country of rural America moved on into modernization, the tourism meant that the people here held on to those ways, not necessarily for the sake of heritage, but because it made economic sense.
Right. Well, and then, I don't think there's any coincidence that so many of the Old West outlaws and lawmen, and a lot of the Old West lawmen that we think of as, the guy in the white hat, were really anti-heroes.
Yeah. Well, and that in and of itself, the no matter who you are, the side that wins the war writes the history.
Right.
And for much of rural America, particularly in the upper South and in the West, the guys with the white hats, the federal government, the bankers, the railroad.
Yes.
These are the guys that were, that we think of and we remember of as not only the winners, but representative of law and order, representative of civilization, industrialization, modernity. Those are the guys with the white hats. And the folks who were fighting them, the folks with an axe to grind, they did that to them, and to the survivors of much of what happened here in the Ozarks. Those factions were the enemy.
Mm-hmm. But so many of the names that we think of from that time period came from here.
Yes.
And I guess cut their teeth on whatever role they ended up in here. And then it still goes forward to say the Depression era gangsters.
It does.
The majority of them were here or had strong connections here.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you can go the influence of that atmosphere is far reaching. For instance, the first novel written in California actually was written by a fella named Roland Ridge from the Ozarks, and he was part Cherokee, part New England background, and well educated. Went out to California in the 49 rush and was a newspaper man. Ended up writing the first novel there, which was the Misadventures of Joaquin Murrieta, which combined sort of the Mexican outlaw character in the California setting, but it really was the kind of characters that he would have encountered here. And ironically, that book is credited with inspiring the Zorro character to be created 50 years later.
That is awesome.
but it's that blend of almost, as you say, part modern outlook, part the wild edge of the Ozarks, and then transplanted to California, you get the same stories. But now we have a Hispanic name because now it's a Mexican bandito.
Yeah. Well, and it really transitions, I think in terms of the base of it is something that we've talked about a lot, and we both share in the heritage. It is Celtic heritage to such a large degree. Scotch Irish, or British, but of Celtic ancestry. And what comes along with that is, and you've done a better job of explaining it than anybody else that I know, which is honor culture.
Well, in honor culture, it goes back to those societies where clan and family and honor was foremost. And you had blood feuds. And people wonder how did we end up with feuds? You know, of course, you had the Hatfield McCoys in Appalachia, but we had feuds here as well.
Yeah,
mainly because it was the same background.
It is.
So,
it is.
You know, honor over an insult or a slight can end up with dozens of people dead.
and a lot of hot-tempered individuals who are ready to defend not only themselves, I think, but a lot of times it isn't even about personal defense. It is about defense of their family.
Defense of the family, and that translates in a larger sense, you know, that defense of the underdog, of the weak, of the disenfranchised, and that gives rise to sort of the myth of the American hero.
Yes,
you know, the loner on the high plains, you know, coming in to save the day. It morphed into, well, Davy Crockett at the Alamo.
Yes.
You know, the myth is not what happened at the Alamo, but we remember it that way, that one person can make a difference. And I think that's the big tie to honor culture, is that one person can make a difference and change things. And so the community will support them, even if their means are not the most honorable.
Well, and you know, we see that with Jesse James, a friend of mine who is over 100. One of her, and she grew up in Christian County, Missouri. Jesse James is one of her heroes.
Well, I mean, Jesse James still to this day is, I think, a hero to a lot of people, even if it's not openly said. In fact, we did one of our Mysterious War States presentations about Jesse James a while back, and we showed the Brad Pitt movie, The Assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford. And there were people in the audience who cried when he died. And it's like they knew what was going to happen, but we actually had grown people crying in the crowd.
Yeah. And something that I think is a tie-in. Fortunately, we were talking about this morning when we were chatting.
Oh yeah! Oh, The Education of Little Tree. Yes.
Written by Forrest Carter, who also wrote The Outlaw Josie Wales, which is a fantastic Clint Eastwood film. But The Outlaw Josie Wales was based in bushwhacker country of Missouri in the Ozarks. Education of Little Tree was based in Appalachia, although it does reference the Ozarks. Fantastic book. Both of them are fantastic works of fiction, and yet the author, who definitely was a part of honor culture, became recognized for a problematic past, and then the books have gotten pulled.
Yes, and that is sort of a problem that sort of we're going through at this point, is that there's a sort of a sanitization of history.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't only see it here in this context like Forrest Carter, but you see it, it goes back to let's deface and pull down all the Confederate statues and everything.
And it's almost a puritanical opinion. Like, if we don't like it, we don't want to be exposed to it. And that gets very problematic, because we begin to run the risk of not learning the lessons of dark history that are crucial. First of all, crucial to keeping us from preventing or repeating those mistakes. And I think I think as we're both writers, we're both authors, not only is history messy, but as mature individuals and critical thinkers, there's such a thing as nuance that you have to understand. None of us are going to fit everybody's idea of what's right.
And I think that what is very interesting about the way the Ozarks have always embraced the outlaw and the anti-hero is it's almost a very honest approach of a human approach of, in a way, acknowledging things are not in a nice, neat little picture with a bow tie. And, sometimes you have to look at, I may not be happy with the means, but there has to be a certain result, and this kind of thing that society doesn't want to entertain right now. But
it is, and I think for generations, people have come to the Ozarks or gotten away, and it's retreating from the constraints of excessive civility.
Exactly. I mean, it's like, for instance, give an example of the Young Brothers massacre, which happened outside Springfield, Missouri, is still the largest loss of law enforcement in one shootout, period. 9.
Yeah.
And when you look at what happened, the officers went out to arrest the Young Brothers because they knew they were driving a stolen car. And the sheriff, when they got there, the sheriff said, "I'm going to go up and knock on the door." He knew them. He knew the family. He had known them for years. "I know the boys. I'll go talk to them." Although he stood on one side of the law, they stood firmly on the other. There was a middle ground, and there's a big question of why did it end up erupting the way it did, and that may in fact be because there was a third party at the house that initiated the shooting that we don't want to necessarily give away at this point. Save that for the show, but it's that. Yes, these are dangerous guys, but I know them. I'll go talk to them. There's everything's not black and white.
No, and I genuinely think that it is a more mature perspective to curate, and I think it's a perspective. The perspectives we have in the world, they don't just happen by accident. They either we absorb them from other people, or we willingly choose to curate certain perspectives. And something that I think may be associated with this, the Ozarks are an incredibly hard place to make a living. And as a result, you have very, very little opportunity to be that terribly impressed by your own opinion.
Or other people's opinion.
Yes, either it works or it doesn't, and there's something deeply objective about that you don't. oh, it kind of strips away so much of the fluff, and in some cases that can go terribly bad.
Yes.
And in other cases that can really be a beautiful thing. And I think, but it really engenders such an amazing people.
Well, yes, and I think the fact that, sort of the anti-hero is such a part of the culture. I think it's also a recognition that because of hard country and hard times at various times over time, an acknowledgement that could be me, so I can understand. I haven't gone down that path, but I can see where they got there.
Mhm.
And being able to take that opinion instead of just a moral condemnation without discussion, one is harder
Yes,
and makes you examine yourself more. And so I think you get a very complex character for the region.
I do too. I do too. And it is complex. I think some cases it's very mature, much more mature than living a comparatively easy life engenders.
I agree. I agree, and I think it has resulted in a lot of interesting situations and characters
I know, and this is
that we
we
get to talk
not
about.
giving not giving away too much, but I mean we had the Blue Meadow feud
Mm-hmm.
on the Christian County Taney County line, not very far from here, and I know people. I know the families, and
Mm-hmm.
they're amazing people. With it's not everybody who has a blood feud in their immediate background.
Well, it does. It can create interesting family discussions.
Mhm. And in that something that these are families that intermarried,
Yes.
and these are families that in some cases, um, after the feud was over, maintained relations. It I think culturally it is something that if you're outside of honor culture, you wouldn't understand.
Very, very true. I mean, if it's for a lot of people, it's hard to understand how do you put certain things aside,
Yeah, yeah,
and you do what you have to do.
absolutely. And and I think of the hot-headedness, the temper of the Celtic peoples, not to be underestimated by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
And and that's real. That's not, and it oftentimes does not fit neatly into civility, which is why many of those people were not living sandwiched next to everybody else in an urban area.
I do think another aspect of honor culture that plays into the character of the region is there tends to be a self-reliance, and where people don't worry about what other people think
Yeah.
either.
Hmm.
And so um, they do live their lives often as they see, without too much care for what the neighbors are thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
I think you lose that a lot in a lot of areas, but you still see that a lot here.
I agree. And something that issues and concerns about race relations over the last 200 years have played a huge role in shaping the history of the Ozarks, and some of that is very dark and deeply unfortunate.
Yes.
Some of the things that I've started uncovering a little bit down here have been, and again, these are individual cases, but situations where where individuals who would have been discriminated against elsewhere ended up in the rural Ozarks, and because they were contributive to the community, and they were hard workers, they were ethical, they were honest, that local community said, I don't care what color you are, because you're just part of the community. And basically, we don't have the luxury to be discriminative.
Well, I think that is part of it there too, and also not caring if there's a skeleton in the closet too. From the past. You may have run from a crime or whatever, scandal or whatever, but if you particularly early on, if you
Yes.
contributed and were a positive part of the community here, then the past didn't follow them as much.
If you're willing to jump in and pull your own weight, we don't care.
Right. A very pragmatic attitude.
Yeah. And I think once and this is, I think, a lesson for all of us, once we get to a certain level of development in terms of civilization, once we're more focused on what we look like and how we look like and who our neighbors are and these types of things, that we literally have the luxury to get picky and to get discriminative, that it's actually a step backwards in terms of civility.
I think it is, and that has come across in a few events as well over time, and progress is not always easy or nice, and but through it all, there still is that core individualism and just belief that we're going to admire certain characteristics of the outlaw and the anti-hero.
Yes.
Regardless of what else we know.
Very true. And in some way, identify with those.
Well, very, very true. Very, very true. So, I think it's something that lends itself in a lot of the stories, and I'm just hopefully we get back to filming and get things rolling so people can see more of this.
Absolutely. And in the interim, we have another book to give away.
That's right. And this Friday, we will be giving away on Facebook Josh's book, Play Child's Doctor. There's a post on the Facebook page, and follow the directions.
Yes.
They're simple this time. They're very simple.
Even if you don't like following directions, they're minimal. Follow the directions.
And you'll get a signed copy.
Yes. For this one, I will be happy to sign it. It was a fun book to write. I think people do enjoy reading it. And this one's for domestic audiences. For this one, right. The last two books went to Algeria.
Yes.
Which was awesome. But these are going to the States. So there you go.
Yes. And if you guys are interested, on Wednesday night, we will be giving away two of my books, Civil War Ghosts of Southwest Missouri, on Instagram. So follow us over there. We'll be doing an Instagram live at 7 Central on Wednesday, and at 8 o'clock we will give those away. So 2 different book giveaways this week. So
absolutely, that's exciting.
It is exciting. It's fun, and it's fun for us, and hopefully you all enjoy. And you get definitely with Josh's book, you get a flavor of the character of the region, as well as a good feel of a lot of the lore that personifies the region.
It is fiction.
Yes.
I've had one person, a couple of people that like, oh, I'm so sorry that happened to you. I'm like, guys, it's fiction. It's not an autobiography. It's fiction. So
that's a sign of good writing.
I hope so. It was like I said, it was a lot of fun. And of course, tune in on Wednesday. Lisa's books are fantastic. Fantastic. You are a great writer, and I'm a huge fan. And of course, those are great books. So tune in, Win Books, like Dark Ozarks. Please share Dark Ozarks both here on Facebook and on Instagram, and help us, get our numbers up. That's what this is about. And as we get our numbers up, it allows us to tell the Ozark story by Ozarkers.
Exactly. Especially those stories where there are no easy answers.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Josh. Bye.